by Fukushima. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Vision radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Good evening, listeners to the Age of Vision radio show. I want to thank you for joining me again. I'm doing a live podcast here on Spreaker, and I apologize for the intro being so weak. I have not figured out how to make the volume stronger. I've kept redoing it, and it's just not working. But I'm not going to let that snag me up. I'm going to slug it out with this program, and eventually we're going to get it back up to speed, and maybe they'll give me some service at Spreaker, but I'm not counting on it. So far, it's been a month and a half, 2 months of frustration, but that doesn't matter. So I am going to be reading to you some stories this evening that are completely, I don't know why I'm always shocked. I have to admit, I am always kind of really just kind of blown away at how often we hear these stories and they just don't seem, nobody seems to really pay attention to it. Hang on, I lost them. I lost the ones that I wanted to read to you. Hold on. They went down. When I was struggling with this intro thing, the whole thing went down. So hold on. Let me see if that's it. Oh my goodness. I apologize for this. Because there's a couple of really good stories about what's going on. This is one. Tri City mayors worry about catastrophic tunnel collapse. I don't think that's the one I wanted to read to you about. I really wanted to read to you about this. I apologize. I'm going to continue with this one. Doggone it. This is what happens when you get all freaked out and you can't figure things out. This is what happens to me anyways. Let me put it to you that way. And oh my gosh. I don't think I'll be able to. I have to go back into my history again because I just lost them all. I don't know where they're at. My goodness. You know what happens when you don't get your groove on and then you're like totally. So I want to bring to you these two stories from Hanford. One is, let's see if I can get into the history. Lord. Okay. So I'm going to have to start all over again because that's how this goes. And this comes from the Tri City Herald. This is a story from Annette Carey. She's actually one of the better reporters reporting on this. And she was talking about, the story basically said that they have really taken contaminated material into the city of Richland. And so now the mayors are actually worried. There's two stories about this. And let's see what this content says. Oh my goodness, it's really sad. There's stories every single day. Like today, there was a story about radioactive the fire at the Hanford radioactive lab sends workers to the hospital. That happens all the time. This one is actually completely blows me away. This one, let me read it to you. I've got the thing back up, and now the page is scrolling down so madly I can't control it. My goodness, I guess I'll get my groove on with this. I'm doing this, I have to say, the Spreaker, doing this podcast on Spreaker is a challenge. I was told that it's actually an easy platform. I can't imagine doing a platform that's difficult, because this is not an easy platform. So anyways, let me get into it, because I was able to find this story. It's called Plutonium-Contaminated Equipment Taken into Richland by Mistake, August 8th, 2018. Richland, Washington. A radiologically contaminated piece of equipment left the Hanford Nuclear Reservation and was taken into North Richland by mistake, according to a message sent Wednesday afternoon to Hanford employees. The equipment, a spreader bar that distributes weight while hoisting items, has been used at Hanford's plutonium finishing plant. Most of the work has stopped at the plant since a spread of plutonium was discovered there in December. Then several employee cars were contaminated, and some employees inhaled radioactive contamination. Some? These people are like delusional. All of them are inhaling radioactive contamination. Okay, back to her story. In the most recent incident, a worker assigned to the Mission Support Alliance, which is responsible for rigging at Hanford, removed the equipment from an area at the plant's complex where radiological contamination might be present without checking it for radiation. The worker believed the equipment had already been surveyed for contamination. The area was designated a radiological buffer zone. The action was taken without the knowledge of upper-level managers at the plant, which is being demolished by CH2M Hill Plateau Remediation Company. The truck carrying the bar left the plant July 26th and drove to two places on the Hanford site and then to a contractor facility in North Richland. The truck later returned to Hanford, and the bar was unloaded at an outdoor yard in central Hanford and moved to a building used to store hoisting and rigging equipment. The bar was checked there, and low levels of plutonium and other radioactive contamination were discovered, according to the message to employees. No radioactive contamination has been found at any place where the truck traveled, according to the message. The Washington State Department of Health, which is responsible for public protection off the Hanford site, has requested records of the surveys done for radioactive contamination and will review them. You know who does the surveys? The people who actually run the plant, which means they can rig it any way they want, which they do. Back to her story. The spreader bar has been moved into an area for contaminated material at Hanford. The Department of Energy is working with its contractors and Washington State Department of Health and Ecology to determine what actions will be necessary to protect workers and the public, according to the employee message. Wow. CH2M has changed its protocols for releasing materials from radiological buffer areas to maintaining accountability and prevent contaminated equipment from being moved out of areas controlled for contaminations, employees were told. A management assessment is planned to start Monday, and with DOE evaluating whether the correct procedures and controls are in place to resume demolition of the plutonium finishing plant. The rigging bar incident will be a focus during the assessment, the message to the workers said. Wow. Oh my God. Do you hear the hidden message here? They're sending out these messages to the workers like, don't worry about it. The rigging bar incident will be a focus of the assessment. The December contamination spread at the plutonium finishing plant came after an earlier spread in June. In the June incident, an air monitor alarmed and workers were ordered to take cover indoors. Checks for workers found 31 had inhaled and ingested small amounts of radioactive particles. After the December spread was discovered, 11 more workers were discovered to have small amounts of contamination radioactively decaying inside their bodies from inhaling or ingesting the particles. Specks of contamination were found after the December incident on 7 worker cars, with at least 2 driven home and one of them a rental car. Oh, that's fabulous. Imagine that. Several of the workers' homes found no Checks of several worker homes found no radioactive contamination. Contamination was also found on vehicles used at the site. Small amounts of radioactive contamination were found to have spread from the plant for miles in December and earlier, with contamination found near the Columbia River and at the site's Rattlesnake Barricade just off Highway 240. That's the main road, you guys. The plant was used during the Cold War to process plutonium, which came into the plant in liquid solution into a solid form that could be shipped to plants to produce nuclear weapons for the nation. The work left the plant highly contaminated, and contamination spread during its demolition into the open air using heavy equipment. In December, demolition was being done then here we always hear these little typos, don't we? Demolition was being done then on of the most contaminated part of the plant, its plutonium reclamation facility. Hanford's officials announced plans in late July to resume demolition of the plant if DOE and its regulators conclude the work can be done safely, based in part on the results of management review that is set to start on Monday. Work could reset after Labor Day to remove contaminated demolition debris left on the ground and unpackaged at the main part of the plant after work stopped in December. Then in October, demolition of part of the main plant that has low levels of contamination could begin. Higher risk demolition work could restart in January, including tearing down a production area of the main plant. The final step will be removing demolition rubble left at the plant's plutonium reclamation facility, with work possibly completed by summer 2019. CH2M Hill plans several changes as work resumes, including more air monitoring and not allowing demolition rubble to accumulate more than a day before packaging it up for removal. Now, this was written, what did I say, August 8th? Updated August 9th. And when did this, it's kind of funny. In December, work stopped on the plant. A message sent to... I'm trying to figure out when this equipment left. A radiologically contaminated piece of equipment left at the Hanford Reservation was taken into North Richland by mistake, according to a message sent Wednesday afternoon to Hanford employees. Well, this is a thing. I don't know, many of you probably have not even really looked at the Hanford plant pictures, but you can go to the Tri City Herald newspaper online. They always... Whenever they write these stories, they always post a really awesome picture of the nuke facility. And it is not a power plant. It's really disgusting to look at what they've done. It's a huge eyesore on the plant. It is just a picture of gray mess and buildings. Hang on just one second. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. I hope I wasn't gone too long. I had to turn the fan off. It got starting to get cold in here. So I also got another story for you that I thought I would read for you. That was actually pretty... It was about... oh my gosh. Here I go again. I lost all these articles that I did. My goodness. The other night I had them down pretty sweet. And this was the Hanford story about The Riverkeepers, the DOE is planning on, wow, so this is really weird. The DOE is planning on putting up a fence around the Columbia generating station away from the waste. Just a fence, like a regular fence, like they did in St. Louis. It's completely outrageous. I mean, I don't know if many of you know about that, but in St. Louis, and I am going to be reporting on that also. I have reported on my radio show. This is the title. I beg your pardon. I found this article. It's called "When It Comes to Hanford's Toxic Pollution, a Fence Just Isn't Enough," Oregon Group says. You think? Here, we have these little weird buttons here. What does this one say? That's kind of creepy, but that's sort of, I think that's appropriate for the Hanford site, don't you think? Let's try that one again. Oh my gosh. So, Richland, Washington, July 17th. The Department of Energy is not being realistic about Hanford may be used in the future as it makes decisions on cleanup of the Hanford nuclear reservation, says Oregon-based Columbia Riverkeeper. The department's vision for Hanford leaves dangerous waste in the place of thousands of years, preventing people from fully using the land, river, and groundwater at Hanford, said a new report by the organization dedicated to protecting the Columbia River water quality. Well, you know, I love those people there, but it's a little too late. This is so unrealistic. DOE's approach rests on a short-sighted analysis of how people may use Hanford in the future, and it fails to anticipate how people will come into contact with Hanford's pollution in hundreds or thousands of years. Columbia Riverkeeper on Tuesday released Competing Visions for the Future of Hanford, a project that began as an effort to take a step back and look at how visions for final cleanup at Hanford conflict. The 580 square mile site in eastern Washington has areas that are massively contaminated by radioactive and hazardous chemical materials from the past production of plutonium for the nation's nuclear weapons program. I beg your pardon. Columbia Riverkeepers is recommending that Hanford's comprehensive land use plan be reopened and amended to address concerns raised by tribes and others. The report became even more timely as Dan Ceres, Columbia River Conservation Director, as DOE began talking this spring about closing underground tanks. The government is proposing that 530,000 gallon tanks, 530,000 gallon tanks that have been mostly but not completely emptied of radioactive and hazardous waste, chemical waste, be filled with concrete-like grout and left in the ground. Not only would some of the waste remain at the bottom of the tanks or clinging to its walls, but the plan would interfere with cleanup of contaminated soil beneath the tanks from waste leaks and spills, the report points out. In places, DOE plans engineered caps that will prevent precipitation from driving waste deeper into the ground. It will also rely on institutional controls such as fences, signs, and land deed restrictions to prevent activities such as digging into contaminated areas and drilling wells where groundwater may remain contaminated. The report shows how time and again energy in capital E, that's the name of the company, energy defaults to building fences, signs, and concrete caps instead of cleaning up dangerous pollution, Ceres said. Of course they do. They have no intention of cleaning this up, you guys. DOE has a land use plan that is periodically updated that designates a limited amount of land to be cleaned up only by industrial standards and much of it to be cleaned up to conservation and preservation standards. By narrowing potential future uses, DOE uses the land use plan to justify leaving pollution in Hanford soil and groundwater, the report says. So this is what they're saying, cleaned up only to industrial standards, and much of it cleaned up to conservation. So what does this mean? Conservation and preservation standards. Does that mean that those standards are much lower than, like, if people were going to go live there? So we can have, like, a forest completely contaminated and that's considered clean? I think that's what they're thinking about in Fukushima. When you start really reading these stories about every single nuclear site, and as you guys join my show over the years, you're going to see a pattern of gross neglect and disregard for life by the nuclear industry, the Department of Energy, the U.S. military. Anyone attached, any pro-nuke organization hates life. Let's just put it to you that way, because nuclear is death. I don't know why I'm shocked. I mean, I feel so naive. Let's get back to this story. Northwest tribes that used Hanford land until the federal government took it over during World War II for production of plutonium have treaty rights to continue to use the land. Let's just stop right there. They didn't use the land. That was their land. They didn't use the land. Northwest tribes lived here before the United States government kicked them off and squeezed them into these places. Treaty rights. This makes me spit nails when we act like, oh, we're doing them a favor, so now you can go live on that land that we've highly contaminated. Your children, you're not going to have children. 5-6 generations ahead is not going to happen because nuclear makes you sterile. Okay, let's keep going. Ooh, sorry for that digression. A cleanup that is suitable for recreational use by people who only visit the area does not meet tribal needs, the reports said. Well, let's just be clear. A cleanup that is suitable for recreational use by people who use only visit. If you're visiting, that's just outrageous. It doesn't matter if you're visiting or living there. You can't stay on a contaminated site. Like, anybody thinking of going over to Fukushima is completely insane. Anyone who's going to go to the 2020 Olympics completely lost their rocker, man. They're completely off of it. Let's get back to this story. It's still a little whiles down. Tribes would like to again use Hanford for hunting, fishing, gathering, and sweat lodges, bringing them into close contact with soils, water, air, plants, wildlife, and fish, the report said. They would like to, but too effing bad, because that ain't going to happen, bud. Not only the tribes, but also the states of Oregon and Washington State dispute DOE's assumptions about how Hanford will be used in the future, the report said. Both states have a strong preference for removing as much waste as possible from Hanford, the report said. In response, DOE said in a statement Tuesday that it recognizes the states' and others' interest in the cleanup and future use at Hanford, and it considers their input valuable. DOE and regulator decisions take into account future uses of the site and other legitimate factors, such as cost and feasibility, DOE said. Our primary goal remains protecting the safety and health of the public and preserving the many natural and cultural resources of the Hanford site. Oh my gosh, this is where I want to start doing the F-bombing now. How can they possibly say that? Why can't they just say the truth? This place, we have destroyed this land and no one can ever live on it again. The group said cleanup plans should comply with treaties and tribal access to Hanford sites not undergoing cleanup should be expanded. Wow. Energy should invest in active cleanup rather than reliance on long-lived institutional controls that impinge on tribes and the general public's potential future use of Hanford, the report said. It could be more cost effective and realistic that relying on the federal government to restrict access and use of large areas of Hanford for hundreds of thousands of years, it said. Wow. It could be more cost effective and realistic that relying on the federal government to restrict access. This is so sad. You know, this is the sad part. We honestly are ignoring. This is why I'm doing this podcast, you guys. We are ignoring the destruction of our environment is completely being 100% ignored by even the people living there. This report, it's insane. They should not even be there. There's a whole group of people with hands and signs. Clean up Hanford. Doing da doing doing. Oh man. I am hoping that I can interview some of these people and ask them straight up. Do you think it's really worth living there? In a place that is contaminated? So I'm going to read that report. This is what it says. And let me look at the time here because I don't really want to go too long. How long have I been doing this? A half an hour. Okay, I think I can do this story. This is the mission statement about the Riverkeepers. Columbia Riverkeeper's mission is to protect and restore the water of the Columbia River and all life connected to it from the headwaters of to the Pacific Ocean. Representing over 16,000 members and supporters, Columbia Riverkeeper works to restore the Columbia River where people can safely eat the fish they catch. You should not eat any fish, and where children can swim without fear of toxic exposure. Oh, man. I mean, that's ridiculous. The future of Hanford, competing visions. Let me see how many pages this is going to be. Ding, 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 ding. Well, I may not get to all of it, but I'll skip around because it's really long. The Nez Perce tribe. Oh, my gosh. I think I should actually read this one. You know what? I'm not going to read this tonight, but I am going to bookmark it, and I will read it in my next podcast. On my next podcast, I actually had this intention of talking to our new listeners about... I'm going to make up a list of all the known sites that I know that are completely being ignored and completely out of control, which they all are. But I mean, we have Hanford. I think I talked to you about the proximity factor with Columbia Generating Station. We have Diablo Canyon, which is a complete disaster. We have San Onofre Nuclear Power Facility, which is closed down in Southern California. But there is huge amounts of waste. And in fact, where the San Onofre Nuclear Power Facility is, and you can go to sanonofresafety.org, and I highly recommend it because there's a lot of information, not just about San Onofre. Donna Gilmore, who is the page administrator, she's created this page. She's the person who discovered that the United States is illogically storing all of our nuclear waste in canisters that are 5/8 inch thick, 1/2 to 5/8 inch thick. And they are made by Holtec, and they are known to crack. And Holtec, by the way, was just granted the right to store the nuclear waste from the other problem plant on the other side of the continent over at Indian Point. And I would strongly suggest that you go to the sanonofresafety.org website if you have any interest in this. And this is the thing. This is why I keep bringing this back up to us. This is not like, oh, the world is bad, we're going to all die, and everything is really horrible. And actually, it is pretty bad. I mean, I don't know if you guys follow Guy McPherson. I apologize for my brain. It's just not shooting on all things. It's late again tonight because I did work all day long. But Guy McPherson, who has a website called GuyMcPherson.com or Nature Bats Last, I think that's the name of it. I think he's a baseball aficionado. So he says nature bats last, right? He was talking about how the Arctic ice this year is probably by September, October not going to be there. And how that's going to create a huge feedback loop. And how that is going to actually create a system where it's going to warm up everything and cause catastrophic effects on our food crops, which are actually suffering because the atmosphere, the environment is going whack-a-doodle, man. We have fires and floods, and the whole thing is just out of whack. The whole technological system has just completely screwed us over. But his video on YouTube today said, well, folks, the civilization's about to collapse. Yeah, I think we are actually collapsing as we speak. So I got through those two stories, and I didn't really prepare a lot of stories. So let me get back to this, because I want to, maybe what I'll do is take a look at the nuclear alerts. See if there's anything that the NRC is telling us about so far. Because, nuclear alerts, we're sort of on a need-to-know basis, right? We don't really need to know. Nuclear notifications. See what this says. They don't really tell us about anything. And in fact, they would not have told us anything about Fukushima if we hadn't watched it blow up. So this is for the report for today, which is August 10th. And the first one that popped up was an unplanned contamination event. I don't mean to laugh, but honestly, the way they report these things is so hilarious. Like, they're planning a contamination. Okay, the Pennsylvania Bureau of Radiation Protection licensee Alaron Nuclear Solutions in Pennsylvania, and they consider this a non-emergency. So when was the event date? So today is August 10th, right? Notification date is August 2nd. Event date was 7/26. So notification date was 8/2. So this is always what I like to do. I'm going to go back, say, to 8/3 and see if we can see that, because let's see, in Pennsylvania, no, it's not there. I don't see it there. I don't see it here. So how long did it take them to tell us about it? This is August 10th. Let's see, maybe they did report it on the 2nd notification date. California, nope. Oh my gosh. So this is, seriously, to me, these are the kinds of things that gets my blood boiling. Here we have a notification date of a non-emergency notified by John Cheapo. Okay, so why is it that the notification date was 8/2? We're getting it on the 10th. The event happened on the 26th. And listen to this. During the process of shredding filters for cement solidification, the licensee had an unplanned contamination event. Loose surface contamination was spread throughout the building with an estimate of total activity of 2 millicuries and the primary isotope being cobalt-60. In addition to building surfaces, several personnel who were working in the area at the time were contaminated. It is unclear at this time the extent of personnel contamination, but inhalation and skin contamination are believed to have occurred. The licensee is currently decontaminating the area using protective clothing and respiratory protection, monitoring the individuals who are working in the area during the time of the event, and has sent a sample of the material to an independent lab for isotope analysis. The licensee will be performing a root cause analysis, and the state will perform a reactive inspection. The cause of this event is unknown at the time. Wow. I don't know how these people live with themselves. So this is again today. There's another notification event, and this one is also a non-emergency. And it is a stuck shutter. And I don't know many of you, if any of you listen to my early shows, but when I first started doing the Age of Fission radio show, I really knew nothing about any of it. So I just went right to the NRC and started reading about these things. And these stuck shutters, these gauges that they use, they always get stuck. But that's the nature of the beast, because radioactivity kills machinery. It always breaks down. I mean, at first I was like, oh my gosh, this stuff is horribly made. And then a gentleman that followed my show left me a comment one day and said, look, let's just think of it logically. It is the nature of the beast, right? So you see gauges, that's the most common notification event, is stuck shutters and things like that. So they expect these things to happen, like Louisiana Radiation Protection Division, ExxonMobil Chemical Company. Non-emergency, gauge failures. Blah, blah, blah. Here we go. One only device is no longer being manufactured. These are just stuck gauges. Which isn't good, because then they're using gauges that don't actually really help. They don't give them any information. I'll just read to you a quick one that talks about it. And I'm not going to read the whole thing because they're really boring. The radiation safety officer, and they love these acronyms, the RSO, at ExxonMobil Chemical Company, XMCO, reported a multi-source gauge failure to the Department of Louisiana in Environmental Quality, LDEQ, by email on 7/25/18 during a routine annual maintenance and preventative maintenance, PM, they said PM, preventative maintenance, checks. It was discovered the level density gauge had several shutters stuck in the open position. 3 sources would not retract into the shielded position. However, the remaining 4 sources were functioning properly. The gauge is a Berthold Technology USA multi-source device, model LB300IS, utilizing AEA Technologies model CKCP 4 sources. There are 7 nominal 50 microcuries of cobalt-60 sources in this device. Okay, so I'm going to pass on this one, because it basically, what happens is these things get broken. They just break. Oh, this is always interesting. These get reported regularly too here. Missing portable density gauge. Colorado Department of Health, EB Engineering. This event happened on 8/2. And so today's date is 8/10. So what's up with that? At approximately 3:30 p.m. on 8/2, engineering reported that a portable density gauge was missing. A technician first discovered it at about 2 p.m. on 8/2/18 when he came back from a job site. The gauge, along with the transport box, chain, and lock, were all missing from the truck. However, nothing else seemed to be taken from the truck. He attempted to search along the road that he had been to, but nothing was found. He reported to another staff of this company, and at that time of this report, the staff is currently driving back to the lab to conduct another search. At this point, it has not been determined whether the gauge simply fell off the truck or was stolen. More information will be provided once available. And this is a Troxler gauge. What city? Boulder, in Boulder, Colorado. Update. They did an update on 8/6. The licensee attempted a few hours of search in late afternoon and evening of 8/2/18, but only found the chain and lock at a street cross in Longmont, Colorado. In the morning of 8/3/2018, a public member contacted the licensee that he got the box. The public member found the box from the side of the street, thought it was a cooler, and brought it to his girlfriend's home. Then he saw the RAM label on the box and contacted the licensee in the morning on 8/3/18. In the morning of 8/3/18, the box and the gauge were then back in the licensee possession shortly after the licensee got a call from this public member. When the box was returned from this public member to the licensee, the box was not locked, but the gauge handle was locked. It did not appear to have any damage to the box or the gauge or the source. Overall, there were at least 2 public members involved in this event, the one who found the box and his girlfriend, but their exposures are still to be determined. Additional information will be included in the NMED report once available. Wow. Wow. That is unbelievable. Okay, so what does this say? This material event contains less than a Category 3 level of radioactive material. Sources that are less than an IAEA Category 3 sources are either sources that are very unlikely to cause permanent injury to individuals or contain very small amounts of radioactive material that would not cause any permanent injury. I hate the IAEA. These people are just complete murderers. Literally murderers. There is no safe level of radioactivity. You know, yesterday I saw a story. I was about to spit nails. It talked about Madame Curie. They were celebrating Madame Curie being called the mother of invention, the cure of cancer. She got called like the most influential woman of, the last 100 years. And they called her the cure. Let's just be really clear. Radioactivity to treat cancer kills the patient. It kills all your blood cells. Patients do not live. When you get radioactivity treatment, you might get cured of cancer and you might live for 5 or 6 years, but your long-term level of health is completely destroyed. I mean, honestly, folks, if I got cancer, there is no way I would ever take radioactive treatment. Can you believe this? August 9th, not a single report, not a single event reported? That's the first time I've ever seen this in 3 years. Not one event reported on a day. Wow. Wow. Oh, here we go. Here's that radiation thing, 529. This is the University of Pennsylvania, a different site. I mean, what is up with this in Pennsylvania? This is on August 8th. I was going backwards. How much time do I have? I have about 15 minutes. I'm going to make my podcast an hour long. Report assessments. Patient skin contamination. A 17-year-old pediatric patient underwent an 834 millicuries meta-iodobenzyl guanidine iodine 131 treatment for brain cancer. The dose was delivered in a 30 millimeter syringe and infused into an automatic pump. I mean, this just infuriates me. This is so outrageous. UPenn stated that the patient's upper thigh was cleaned. They washed him off. He reported discomfort and reddening on his upper right thigh. That kid's gonna die. He's got brain cancer, and they poured radioactivity on him. This is a really long report. It's on August 8th if you want to go and read it. It is an outrage. It really speaks to the lack of concern these people have for human life. Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is a medical event. Where was this? In Georgia. This event has been retracted. Why was it retracted? It was found no contamination on the patients, another patient being contaminated. And then here we are again. This event has been retracted. Fuel cycle facility, General Electric. You know what? I have to say that since Trader Trump took over the government, I don't trust any of this. I think that they will definitely lie. Disabled ventilation systems, lost or degraded safety items, disabled ventilation systems, retracted from Scott Murray to Howie Crouch. The report invented was disabled approximately for 12 minutes. Based on the subsequent review of the S&M inventory records and additional survey measurements, it's been determined that the event report should be retracted. This is so outrageous. This is beyond. It just goes on. I mean, this is just, ugh. I don't know how you guys, it's funny because when we decide to do these podcasts, right, we're doing it because I personally am doing it because I want to share this information with people. I want people to understand that things are not all being handled properly at the nuclear industry. In fact, things are intentionally not being handled properly. There is just blatant disregard for human life consistently, time and time again. It is such an outrage. I honestly do not know how anyone could work in that industry or respect any of them. But we have an obligation ourselves to learn how to take care of ourselves. One of the things that we can do is really don't feed the monster. Like, make every effort that you can to eat good, healthy food. Get exercise. Stay happy. One of the things that we really have to do is guard ourselves, protect ourselves. I think I read that story the other night about the fires. The fires are re-releasing radioactivity, not just from Fukushima, but from anywhere that we've had it, like from the World War II, post-World War II nuke bomb testing. That's all in the forest, too. It's still sitting there. Plutonium is 24,500 years, folks. I mean, it is just beyond comprehension what has gone on, and we are expected to just sit down and shut up and don't even think about it. That's what they expect us to do. We are told we cannot do it. I'm going to take a look and see what's today's news. Oh, and they are pushing nuclear so hard. They want it. What does this one say? Nation's oldest nuclear plant reduces power generation due to water leak. That's today. Oh my gosh. Let's take a look at this one. Incident at San Onofre nuclear power plant prompts additional training measures. There we go. Oh my gosh. Well, let's go to those two. Let's go see what happens. What do we think the world's oldest nuclear power plant? I don't know which one it is. Oyster Creek. Oh, I did not know that. A water leak at Oyster Creek generating station has forced the nation's oldest nuclear power plant to operate at reduced capacity as it nears the final month before closure. The leak is in a tube in a water feed heater, and the plant's owner, Exelon Generation, has taken the heater out of service, causing the plant to produce about 70% of its usual power. So why wasn't that reported? What date is this? August 10th. So I am definitely going to be checking on Monday to see if they report this. Sheehan said there's no concerns about the leak causing contamination into Bargonet Bay, its cooling water source, or affecting plant employees because the reactor system works on a closed loop. The reactors turn the water into steam, which rotates a turbine to generate electricity. The leftover steam is cooled and converted into water before it starts the recycle all over again. Residents won't notice a difference in their electricity supply because Oyster Creek is part of a larger grid. The truth is, we could close every single nuclear power facility and we could barely skip a beat. Oyster Creek is the oldest operating commercial nuclear power plant in the nation, according to the NRC, and is slated to stop completely generating electricity on September 17th. Thank God. About a decade ago, New Jersey officials informed Exelon that it would need to add costly cooling towers in order to continue operating for the next 20 years. The state and the company reached an agreement that the company didn't have to add the towers if it agreed to close after just 10 years. Once it stops generating energy, the plant must undergo the lengthy process of being decommissioned or cleaned, according to Suzanne D'Ambrosio, the Oyster Creek communications manager. In late July, Camden-based Holtec International announced it will purchase Oyster Creek and take over, this is what I was thinking of earlier, and take over the plant's spent nuclear waste and its decommissioning trust fund, worth about $980 million. Why do you think Holtec wants it? They're putting this waste in half-inch thick containers that leak, and we're going to pay them almost $1 trillion. This is just so, it makes me just want to spit nails. We have people sleeping on the streets in our country. We have children going to school hungry. We have people who can't get medicine that they need that will cure them because their insurance companies turn them down. And we have these nuclear power facilities denying their workers negative health is caused by working there. And we're going to pay Holtec $1 trillion. Okay, I'm going to get going. Let's read the rest of this article. Exelon estimated that the cost to restore the site to its original state would cost near $1.4 billion. We can pretty much triple that, right? Holtec International must obtain permission from the NRC before it can take over Exelon's license in Oyster Creek. The NRC is hosting a public meeting about the license transfer on August 15th in Rockville, Maryland. And this is the address, 11555 Rockville Pike in Rockville, Maryland at 1 p.m. on August 15th. This was written by Cassidy Grom. She may be reached at cgrom@njadvancedmedia.com. Wow. I think this is what really drives me to do this, you guys. I mean, I'm so looking forward to conducting interviews and getting my groove back on with interviewing the activists. I spoke with Dave Parrish of Operation Save the Earth. This weekend I'm going to be uploading his YouTube videos. Dave puts out a YouTube video on YouTube about the Fuku fighters, which is what we call ourselves, those of us who have paid attention since Fukushima fell apart. There's probably, I don't know, at least a couple thousand people at least who consider themselves Fuku fighters. We talk to our neighbors, we pay attention to the news, and we really want to get truth and justice. We want people to start admitting the fact that radioactivity is a horrible, horrible disaster, and there's no safe level of it. I mean, all of us are just dumbfounded that people are planning on going to Japan for 2020. This is just such an outrage. But I'm going to be posting up Nuclear Hot Seat on my channel. I will be posting up Water is Life and Dave's thing. And Nuclear Hot Seat is easy for me to put up. I've gotten Libby Hill Lavy's permission. Dave's given me permission to put up his Fuku Friday videos. I will be interviewing Dave very soon, and then that'll be a pre-recorded interview, and we will put it up. The reason I like Dave Parrish is he actually talks to us about how to keep our spirits up, how to keep the fight going. He's given me so much encouragement. It's because this is a lonely road. We're in communities where people don't want to talk to us about this. They'd rather not think about it because it is really painful. It's not something that's easy. But that doesn't mean we can't face it. I think we have an obligation to face it, frankly. So we don't really have a choice. This has been foisted on us, and it is our obligation to embrace it and make every effort we can to save what little time we have with our children and on our planet. You know, as I'm reading that story, I was kind of spitting nails about the Riverkeepers because this is one of my frustrations. They act as if Hanford can actually be cleaned up. I mean, I get it that the tribes up there the Nez Perce and the Yakima tribes, they have been super screwed by our government. I mean, they're sick. Their children are sick. They're doing the best they can, but, they're living on the Hanford site, and they're up there. It actually does contaminate all over the place. I mean, we had those plutonium processing plants right on the river for a long time, right on the river. They moved them in, and then they destroyed them. But, plutonium lasts 24,500 years. And you can't, once it's in the water, you can't take it out. And in fact, that's why we have tritium in all of the water, because you can filter out almost everything, but you cannot filter out tritium, because tritium is H2,3, not H2O. So water is part of tritium. And it does cause catastrophic harm to people's health. At any level, there is no safe level of radioactivity, period. Done deal. So what we have to do is demand an end to nuclear power facilities. And I hope that people are calling their elected officials saying, look, I've heard about this proximity factor of the Columbia generating station, and that if something happens at the Columbia generating station, the Hanford tanks are going to blow up and we'll have a fire for 100,000 years. At least. And that is exactly what's going to happen. If we don't close the Columbia generating station, we are going to destroy North America, period. This is a catastrophe waiting. It is not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. So I hope every person who listens to this podcast, and, maybe there's several 100,000, but if we could get even 500 people to call their elected officials, pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, I heard something called the proximity factor. The Hanford nuclear waste site is only 12.7 miles away from an active nuclear power facility that sits on top of an active earthquake fault. And if that earthquake happens and the power facility has even a small meltdown and Hanford has to close for 72 hours, we are likely going to have a fire that will explode from one of those tanks that will last 100,000 years. They'll say thank you very much, click, and then go have lunch with their donors. So, I don't know. I mean, I think we still need to push back. It's kind of like this whole idea about not voting. Voting doesn't matter if we vote. If they steal our votes, make them steal our votes. But I think not voting is really, it's antithetical to democracy. I mean, we have a democratic republic where we elect our peoples to represent us. We don't have a true democracy, a one-to-one vote. Like my congressman, Pete DeFazio, he represents something like 350,000 people, one person. We have 2 senators. They represent the whole state. So I see we're coming on to just an hour, and I want to thank everybody for joining us. This is my 3rd podcast on Spreaker. I'm still slugging it out with this doggone program. I can't quite figure out how to make the intro sound better. There's a bunch of things I haven't figured out how to do. Let's put it to you that way. That's why I'm coming live, because I haven't figured out how to make it sound right when I do an upload, a pre-recorded thing. But I'm going to be slugging that one out too, because I'm doing a pre-recorded interview with Dave Parrish from Operation Save the Earth very, very soon, and I'm super looking forward to it. So I'm going to be getting my groove back on with this radio show. We really appreciate it. Please click and like my YouTube channel. Let's increase my YouTube viewership so that we can get this information out. We can have some ongoing conversations. Once I get this program down, I'm going to have more of a time that is in during the day when people could call in, because you have the capacity to call in. So right now it's a pre-recorded interview, a pre-recorded radio show. And I do appreciate it. So Thank you so much for joining us, and put your courage feet on. And remember, happiness is resistance and love is greater than fear. And it will take all of us. Take care, you guys.